All right, it's your boy Spank Dog, aka Puffinstein at YouTube. Like, comment, share, subscribe. You already know. Tick the notification bell so you know when I go live and when I post. BC Spank Dog at Instagram and Robert Lopez at Facebook. Let's get into it. Our leader seems to have a way of just putting us in a bad light. For people, the whole globe, anybody that watches, do us a favor. Don't associate us with the man who was elected. First of all, in order to be elected, you need a little more than half the votes. So even though he won, in a large victory, there were still millions and millions of people that didn't vote for him. So when you say the USA because of something he does, that's not fair to millions and millions of people. And now, to be honest with you, a lot of the Republicans that voted for Trump, I think they're regretting it right now. We're going to get right into it. There ain't no time to waste. We're going to take a look at Trump blaming the Ukraine for Russian invasion. All right, this is my people, the Young Turks. If you don't know them, you must be under a rock. Let's get into it.
President Donald Trump met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Saudi Arabia today, much to the chagrin of the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelinsky, who very much wants to be part of peace negotiations in order to end the ongoing war in Ukraine.
Let me just stop real quick. Zelinsky, I wrote Trump needs to take a page out of Zelinsky's book. Zelinsky, to me, he seems like a real leader. Now, Zelinsky, when his back was against the wall, granted, he got help from the United States. But that's what NATO's there for. There were war crimes committed in the attack on Ukraine. So I'm going to leave it at that for now.
Now, I'm going to get to what Trump and Putin are allegedly working toward outside of a potential peace agreement with Ukraine. But before I get to that, I do think it's important to really hyper focus on some of what Donald Trump had to say, which really does have Volodymyr Zelensky furious with the Trump administration.
How do you let Biden help him and we give Zelinsky weapons because they attacked the Ukraine? And we've even found out, we've heard reports saying that there's 72 trillion worth of precious minerals in the Ukraine, especially around that area where they're fighting. I believe it's called Kiev. What Donald Trump is doing to Zelensky is underhanded. He didn't even go to the meeting, and he's the man that watched all his people get hurt and get slain. And you're talking about his peace talks without even inviting him.
Feeling alienated and abandoned by America. Our European allies are also very much concerned about some of these statements. But apparently Trump said or implied that the war is partly Ukraine's fault. He said this, and I'm quoting verbatim, "You should have never started it," Trump said of Ukraine while criticizing President Volodymyr Zelensky, who had expressed concern.
Now, we all know that that's not true.
That his country was not included in talks between the United States and Russia in Saudi Arabia. Trump continues by saying, "I think I have the power to end this war, and I think it's going very well. But today I heard, oh, well, we weren't invited," essentially referring to Volodymyr Zelensky. And then he continues, "Well, you've been there for 3 years," Trump told reporters at Mar-a-Lago. "You should have never started it. You could have made a deal." Trump also went on to argue that he could have made a deal for Ukraine that would have given them almost all of the land that's now essentially, at the heart of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine. And he continued.
I mean, they lie like it's nothing. I don't believe anything that he says. I believe that 72 trillion of precious resources are there in Kiev. And I think he has no problem betraying Zelensky and getting with Putin so that he could come off in the deal.
Continues to say everything, almost all of the land, and no people would have been killed, and no city would have been demolished, and not one dome would have been knocked down, but they chose not to do it that way. Now, if you can recall, early on in this war, which began in February of 2022.
First of all, what was their reason for bombing the Ukraine in the first place? They had no good reason to attack the Ukraine. They make up some mumbo jumbo about why, and then they just start bombing them. Not only that, they're not targeting military structures. They're attacking civilian structures.
The then Prime Minister of UK, Boris Johnson, had met with Volodymyr Zelensky, essentially discouraging him from engaging in peace talks. And the reason for that is that the West wanted to essentially have Russia expend their military capability, essentially bleed out their military capability through the course of this war. But there has been a price to pay for Ukrainians, of course, in having this war drag on. And in the beginning, Vladimir Putin was under the assumption that this was an easy war to win. It was not easy. In the very beginning, he was having a lot of difficulty. His military.
He was sadly mistaken. Zelensky's a real fighter. He's a good person. He fights with his heart. He only fought because he was pressed. Nothing bullyish about it. Like on some real hero stuff. I'm not gonna let you punk me. I'm not going out like that. I'm gonna stand up. I'm gonna stand up for my people.
Terry was having a lot of difficulty. And so he was in more of a position to agree to peace talks back then. But as the war kind of heated up and Russia was able to secure more and more territory in Ukraine, he was less incentivized to engage in peace negotiations. Now Donald Trump is involved, and it's clear to me that there are certain business negotiations taking place, and I'll give you some more details on that in just a moment, Cenk. But first, I wanted to get your thoughts on what he had to say about Ukraine partly being responsible for this war.
I said they want some of that 72 trillion, and if him getting with Putin gets him a larger amount of that, I believe that Trump will go with whatever leader promises him more of that 72 trillion.
Yeah, so that's enormously unfair. The people responsible for a war, the people who started, and so and continued it, and are more powerful and taking land, et cetera, et cetera. So in this case, there's no question the Russians started it.
Yes, sir. What's up, Nunya, man? I missed you, man. I haven't been live in a second. Yeah, let me highlight that comment. I like that one. I always got to co-sign something that you say. You always say something wise, The
U.S. make mistakes that partially led up to the war. I think they did. I think talking about Ukraine being in NATO further antagonized Russia, et cetera. But at the end, they said that they wouldn't be in NATO and Russia attacked anyway. So not helpful. In the beginning, when Trump first took office, I was slightly encouraged, Anna, because he didn't immediately give away the whole deal to the Russians, and it looked like he was actually going to negotiate, and he was going to even threaten them a little bit. So I'm not in the camp of don't talk to Putin by yourself and exclude the Russians. I'm saying the Ukrainians and the Europeans. I don't really care how peace talks start as long as they talk. So there's also some.
Yeah, nobody wants war. That I agree with. But Zelinsky, while he was attacking him and he thought that he could win the war like nothing, he was hurting civilians, even taking lives of civilians. And Zelinsky started pounding them, and deservedly so, because that's what you do to a bully. You give them what they deserve. In my eyes, Zelinsky is a real leader. A real hero. That's a man that had no choice, and he stood up and he pushed back the snake, the real evil. You know what I'm saying? That's a good man, and he fought. You don't see that all the time.
Some encouraging things, because that has begun, and they come out saying that they're more likely to reach an agreement. But part of the reason they're more likely to reach an agreement is because that initial credit to Trump for seeming a little bit more unbiased is now quickly dissipating as he's going around, him and his administration, saying basically Russia was right about everything. That's not at all helpful to the negotiations. So, and right. Now I'm very worried about the Ukrainians.
All of this is kind of coming into focus for me. And so I'm gonna take a step back and give you all the broader picture in just a minute. But in regard to the conversations between Donald Trump and Putin in Saudi Arabia, they actually didn't focus the majority of their talks on ending the war in Ukraine. Obviously, that was one of the topics, but it was essentially a way of opening up diplomatic avenues in which additional negotiations and talks centered on a peace deal will take place. So in an interview with the Associated Press after the meeting, US Secretary of State Marco Rubio said that the two sides agreed broadly to pursue 3 specific goals. That includes restoring staffing at their respective embassies in Washington and Moscow, of course, to create a high-level team to support Ukraine peace talks and to explore closer relations, and this is important, economic cooperation.
Economic cooperation. It's about the money, man. You know, why you think Trump is speaking to Putin before he's speaking to Zelinsky? Or why do you think they had the meeting and Zelinsky wasn't there? Because Trump wants to see what Putin's talking about while Zelinsky ain't around, and he wants to know what he thinks about that 72 trillion in resources.
This deals, but I actually think this is more about what his policy goals are in regard to the economy. So earlier this month, I had done a story about how one of Donald Trump's avenues to lower inflation was to encourage Saudi Arabia to increase their oil production. If there's more oil supply, the idea is that's going to bring oil prices down. That's going to translate to lower prices when it comes to goods and services because of, transport and all of that. But Saudi Arabia is like, nah, bro, we're not going to do that because the more oil they produce, the cheaper oil is, the more their economy suffers. Now, let's not forget that the ongoing war in Ukraine has had an impact on inflation. Ukraine is known as the, bread bowl of the world. And so when that war started, that's when inflation really started to tick up. And in addition to that, remember, because of the fact that Russia invaded Ukraine, the United States slapped some pretty significant sanctions against Russia. I think that Donald Trump is now seeing Russia as a potential player in his efforts in lowering inflation. Essentially, remove the sanctions after there's a peace deal at play, have them produce oil. Once you get rid of those sanctions, that oil is more available on the economic global market. And I think that's what this is really about. I think he is seeing Russia as a tool to lower inflation. So people stop bugging him about the fact that he didn't lower inflation on day one, which was a ridiculous promise to make. That's my read of it. I'm curious what you think.
So I think that's a really good take on it and accurate. And remember, one of his giant campaign promises was drill baby drill is going to lead to lower prices. Now he's authorized drill baby drill to no end, and it doesn't really matter because Obama and Biden had broken records on how much they allowed drilling anyway.
And fracking increases the chances of earthquakes. Fracking, which is underwater drilling, to get oil, can increase the chances of earthquakes by tremendous ratio.
So it's not like he had that much to add, but that was never going to work. And we've always said that it was never going to work. It's certainly not related to the price of eggs. And it's not even related to the price of oil in the world market because we're only one country. Aha, but when you involve Saudi Arabia, the Russians, and all of OPEC, then you can affect the worldwide oil market and bring down gas prices, and then pretend that your drill baby drill policy is what led to it, open up more federal land for your donors to ravage and then not give anything back to the American people on, et cetera, et cetera. So it checks off a lot of boxes for him. And
before I forget to, big shout out to the Young Turks, man. Big shout out to Adam Mockler, the Midas Touch Network. You know what I'm saying? There goes the thumbs up. I'm already subscribed. If you guys ain't subscribed to the Young Turks, I definitely recommend you subscribe.
Only downside is he has to probably throw Ukraine under the bus, which I don't think he cares about it at all.
You heard him, right? Throw Ukraine under the bus. I said it before he said it, and then I didn't see this. This is the first time I'm watching this with you. I seen like the first 3 minutes, but I just was talking about him not caring about the Ukraine. And sure enough, Sank comes out with it right now.
This is for him. I don't think he cares about it at all.
Of course he.
I agree, actually, about that. I don't think he cares all that much about Ukraine. I think
he don't care about you. He don't care about me. He don't care about the Ukraine. He don't care about Putin. You act like just because he's gonna do business with Putin, he don't care about Putin either. He don't care about nobody. He don't care about none of us. He cares about himself.
Fact of the matter is, Ukraine doesn't really have much leverage. So Volodymyr Zelensky is furious. He's furious for good reason. He feels that he's been.
Zelinsky got no choice but to let this type of shit happen because he got no leverage. Just like he said, we gave him the weapons to be able to do what they did to them.
Been kind of blocked out of peace negotiations. You know, Secretary of State Marco Rubio argues that is not the case. We're just having initial conversations to reestablish diplomatic ties with Russia. And of course, at the end of the day, Ukraine will be involved in peace negotiations. But
I just want the war to end, though, to be honest with you. But I don't like how this is going down. But peace is the big thing, man. Because let me tell you something. It's easy to have a war. It's easy to have a fight. It's way harder to show restraint, you know. So let's just stop the war, you know. But there's war profiteers, if you get what I mean.
But nonetheless, unfortunately for Zelensky and Ukraine, they really do need US military support in order to continue with the war. So this is going to pressure Zelensky to come to the table, number one. But also, it's going to probably pressure Zelensky to accept a deal that he doesn't like. That's my prediction. I hope I'm wrong about that. But considering which players in this whole equation have the leverage, I think Ukraine is probably going to end up accepting a deal they don't like.
Yeah, let me just give last word to a couple of our members on Twitch. So Yayboy07 said Ukraine is 0.00% responsible for this war. I largely agree with that. You know, if anyone was responsible outside of Russia, I'd put it on more of the Western nations that pushed forward, including the US. And I don't know why Biden seemed to signal that a minor incursion would be okay. That was, and it literally might have been that he has dementia. And so I think there's a tiny bit of responsibility. I don't know if I even know about tiny bit, but some responsibility on the West and America in general. But Ukraine has been the victim throughout in all of this.
Right.
And No Math Dragon doubled down on their earlier suggestion, which I really liked when we were discussing this about a week ago. Give Ukraine their nukes, at least as a bargaining chip, but that isn't Trump's plan. So if you really wanted to do the right thing here, not just for the Ukrainians, but for us, for everyone involved, and especially for peace, you would negotiate as hard as possible right now with the Russians, and you'd ask for as good a deal as you can get for the Ukrainians and for us, right? And maybe that deal, not maybe, certainly that deal would not be perfect. And there's a lot that the Ukrainians would really hate about that deal because it would involve a compromise involving land. And that's so fundamentally unfair to the Ukrainians. But that's what a peace negotiation would look like.
I love what he says and I love what she says. They always keep it so official.
That member's comment and suggestion, because I wouldn't want Ukraine to get their nukes back, but I would want to use it as leverage. Because it's a rare thing that can create leverage. Now, without that kind of leverage, it looks like Trump is giving away the store. I don't know that he even wanted the leverage, to be honest. But he's back to, okay, something for us, something for the Russians, Ukrainians in Europe, not so much.
Yeah, and look, I'll end on this. The way this is playing out for Ukraine really does discourage other nuclear powers from denuclearizing, which Donald Trump claims is one of his policy goals. He claims that he wants to get other countries to, including the United States, by the way, to denuclearize. Now, whether you believe him on wanting to accomplish that goal or not is beside the point. Let's just assume, for the sake of this conversation, that he's serious about it, that he's sincere about it. Any country who goes along with a US deal to denuclearize would be crazy considering what has just happened with Ukraine. So we'll see how this all plays out, but obviously we're staying on the story. We'll give you more details as it develops.
You voted for him, you know, and now you gotta pray that how his first month turned out, his first 2 months, first month, 2 months turned out is not a sign of what's to come. It's your boy Spank Dog. God bless you guys. Have a good night. Much love.